Hi everyone. Today we're taking a look at the USS Charger, CVE-30, an escort carrier of the United States Navy during World War II. It played an important, yet often overlooked role in the training of naval aviators. Originally laid down in 1940 as a commercial passenger and cargo liner named Rio de la Plata, the ship was requisitioned and converted into an escort carrier with the intention of transferring it to the Royal Navy under the Lend-Lease program, and was briefly known as HMS Charger, D-27. However, just days after being commissioned, the transfer was cancelled, and the vessel returned to US Navy control, becoming the USS Charger, CVE-30. You've probably come across these dramatic photos shared online, often without context, sometimes by trolls, sometimes just for shock value. But today, we'll uncover the real story behind these crashes. Why did so many aircraft end up mangled on the flight deck of the USS Charger? To understand the chaos, we need to look past the wreckage and focus on the mission. The Charger wasn't a frontline combat carrier. It was something far more critical, a floating classroom. During World War II, the United States needed thousands of carrier-qualified pilots, fast. These weren't just any pilots, they had to master the art of landing a high-speed, piston-engine warplane onto a floating, rolling, pitching strip of steel barely longer than a football field. Sounds insane? That's because it was. Landing on a carrier required pinpoint precision, nerves of steel, and lightning-fast reflexes. One mistake could send a plane skidding into the ocean, or into the control tower. And Charger was where thousands of aviators took their first real steps toward the deadly dance with the deck. Located mostly in the calm waters of Chesapeake Bay, USS Charger operated non-stop, launching and recovering aircraft in rapid succession. Each pilot had to execute multiple touch-and-go landings under the watchful eyes of instructors. Mistakes were inevitable. And yes, accidents happened. A lot of them. But here's the thing, every twisted wing and cracked fuselage you see in those pictures meant a lesson learned. And every lesson saved lives later, in the battles of the Pacific and beyond. Many of the pilots who trained aboard the Charger would go on to fly in major operations, from Midway to the Philippines. The training they received on this humble escort carrier gave them the skills to survive, and to win. So next time you see one of these shocking crash photos, remember, you're looking at the high cost of mastery. USS Charger wasn't a failure, it was a forge. And the men it trained became the sword. Let me tell you a few stories about pilot training, stories that happened right on the deck of the USS Charger. In 1942, Lieutenant Grant, who had previously flown PBY Catalinas, made his first landing on the Charger in a TBF Avenger. Let's just say, it didn't go smoothly. He caught the arresting cable awkwardly, flipped the entire torpedo bomber onto its back, and skidded toward the stern. Miraculously, Grant walked away without a scratch, but the crew would joke for a week afterward that the turkey tried to perch, and rolled off the roost. In 1943, one nervous cadet completely missed the deck and plowed directly into the island, the command tower of the carrier. The plane disintegrated on impact, but somehow the trainee survived. He was dragged out of the wreckage and instantly became a local legend. From that day forward, he was known as Kamikaze Kid. Then there was Cadet Jackson. Inspired by Charles Lindbergh, he decided to show off during takeoff. He pulled into a barrel roll. Right off the launch. The stunt ended with him crashing into parked aircraft on the deck. The resulting investigation with his instructors lasted longer than his entire naval career. In the thick fog of 1943, another pilot flying an SBD Dauntless missed the flight deck entirely. But instead of plunging into the sea, he vanished into a smokescreen and began circling the ship, totally blind. He ran out of fuel, ditched in the water, and was picked up alive and unharmed. And in 1945, a wide-eyed rookie lined up for his first catapult launch in an F-6F Hellcat. So nervous he could barely breathe, he pulled the throttle too early. The aircraft launched straight up and splashed right down into the water. Rescue crews reached him within minutes, and his instructor dryly commented later, "If every launch went like that, I'd be a drunk by now." Over the course of the war, USS Charger handled over 15,000 landings, becoming a true factory of mistakes that saved lives. Because it was far better to wreck a plane off the coast of Virginia than over the skies of Okinawa. What kind of aircraft were used to train thousands of US Navy pilots during World War II? Not some lightweight, forgiving trainers, but the real thing. First up, the TBF Avenger. A massive, torpedo-carrying beast with the handling of a flying truck. Landing an Avenger on the short deck of an Escort carrier was like trying to park a school bus on a moving skateboard. Many failed dramatically, but those who succeeded earned instant respect. Then came the SBD Dauntless, the Navy's iconic dive bomber. Known for its legendary role at Midway, it was also a challenging aircraft to master. Pilots learned to dive at steep angles and still make precise carrier landings, skills that separated the rookies from the aces. Fighter pilots trained on the rugged F-4F Wildcat, a tough little workhorse that helped win the early battles of the Pacific. Later in the war, some cadets graduated to the sleek and deadly F-6F Hellcat, an aircraft that would go on to dominate the skies over the Pacific Islands. And then there was the SNJ Texan, a trainer often used on land, but occasionally brought aboard for final carrier qualification. It looked innocent, until you tried to land it on a rolling ship in bad weather. These weren't simulations. There were no second chances. Every approach, every touchdown, every crash landing was real. Let's return to the USS Charger itself, and start by taking a closer look at its construction and design. The story of Charger begins not as a warship, but as a civilian ocean liner. On November 29, 1939, the United States Maritime Commission accepted a bid from Sun Shipbuilding and Drydock Company to construct 4 C-3P and C-class combination cargo and passenger ships. One of them, later known as USS Charger, was originally planned as the SS Rio de la Plata, the third ship in that series. These vessels were cutting edge for their time. Built for Moore MC Cormac's American Republic's line, they were meant to operate between the east coast of the United States and South America. And they were designed with comfort and innovation in mind. The Rio de la Plata was to feature 2 6-cylinder Sundocs for diesel engines, producing over 9,000 shaft horsepower. A top speed of over 20 miles per hour. Full air conditioning throughout the passenger spaces, a first for American-built liners. And accommodations for 196 passengers in a mix of single cabins, doubles, and even private veranda suites. These were no small vessels, displacing 17,500 tons and stretching nearly 500 feet in length, with cargo space totaling 440,000 cubic feet. But then came the war. On May 20, 1941, with global conflict escalating and the US rapidly preparing for the possibility of full-scale involvement, the Maritime Commission requisitioned all 4 ships, before they were completed for conversion to military use. The transformation from luxury liner to escort carrier began. Sun Shipbuilding, which had originally built the ship, was also tasked with beginning the conversion. But the final transformation into an aircraft carrier was completed by Newport News Shipbuilding and Drydock Company in Virginia, one of the most capable naval shipyards in the country. The upper decks were redesigned to accommodate a flight deck, aircraft elevators, a hangar bay, a resting gear, and all the essential systems of a functioning carrier. The elegant passenger interiors were stripped away and replaced with aviation fuel tanks, storage for bombs and torpedoes, and accommodations for hundreds of naval personnel. This once glamorous liner was now ready to serve a very different mission, not to ferry tourists to South America, but to train carrier pilots for war in the Pacific. While she never sailed into the heart of combat zones, her mission was no less crucial. Throughout the war, the Charger's operations were centered in the calm but strategically vital waters of Chesapeake Bay. But don't let the serene setting fool you, this ship was a relentless training machine. Day after day, flight after flight, the Charger served as a floating classroom. She trained thousands of young Navy pilots and flight crews in the art of carrier operations, skills that would later be put to the test in the deadly cat-and-mouse game against German U-boats in the Atlantic. These men, trained on her decks, became the backbone of escort carrier groups. Their knowledge, forged in the rigorous routines aboard the Charger, helped turn the tide in one of the most dangerous theaters of the war. In August 1942, she was reclassified as a CV-30, and later in July 1943, officially designated CVE-30. In October 1942, the escort carrier USS Charger made a rather unexpected ferry voyage to the island of Bermuda, transporting a batch of US Navy F-4F Wildcat fighters. But upon arrival, the crew was met not with fanfare, but with a fair bit of surprise, and logistical headache. It turned out the local authorities hadn't been warned of the incoming delivery. The British airfield at Bermuda was already packed to the rafters with Royal Air Force Hurricane fighters. Hangar space? Absolutely zero. With nowhere else to go, the American Wildcats were unceremoniously left out on the tarmac, exposed to the salty sea air and unpredictable island weather. But the real comedy began ashore. One young American pilot, thrilled to stretch his legs on dry land, decided to engage in a friendly poker game with a group of British officers. Friendly, however, quickly turned into financially catastrophic. In less than an hour, he had gambled away his entire month's salary. The British, amused and a bit impressed by his reckless generosity, gave him a nickname on the spot, Lieutenant Donor. Her wartime service quietly came to an end in March 1946, when she was decommissioned in New York. The Charger left behind a powerful legacy, one measured not in enemy kills, but in lives prepared for war. But her story didn't end there. In fact, a surprising new chapter was just beginning, one that would see this former warship cross oceans, not with pilots and planes, but with families chasing dreams. On January 30, 1947, the Charger was sold to the Vlosov Group, a shipping company looking to expand its post-war fleet. After a full conversion, the former escort carrier was reborn as the Fairsea, a passenger liner operated under the Sitmar Line, managed from Italy. Gone were the fighter decks and catapults. In their place, cabins, dining halls, and wide-open decks made to carry thousands of hopeful migrants from war-torn Europe to a new life in Australia. Successive upgrades to her accommodations helped keep the ship in service for over 2 decades. And among those who made the journey aboard the Fairsea were some future stars. In 1958, a young family named Gibbs stepped off the ship, bringing with them 3 brothers, Barry, Morris, and Robin. In time, they would become the legendary Bee Gees. Also aboard were their baby brother Randy, who would also rise to solo fame, as well as the future parents of pop icon Kylie Minogue, and Skyhook's guitarist Red Simmons. On January 29, 1969, almost exactly 22 years after her sail, the Fairsea was crippled by a devastating engine room fire while sailing between Tahiti and Panama. Primarily due to a lack of spare parts, she was sold for scrap in Italy in 1969, the last of the four to cease operation. The USS Charger, reborn as the Fairsea, carried countless others toward hope, opportunity, and new beginnings. Thanks for watching.